So welcome back guys to another video. And have you ever heard about a game series and you asked yourself, man, I'd really like to get into this series, but I don't know where to start? Especially a series that may have numerous entries and tons of spin-offs. Well, today I'm going to be recommending some of my favorite games to my favorite series for you guys to try out. And the first game we'll be talking about is a series I've recently myself have started getting into, and it's taken many years, and it's a very popular series from Nintendo, and that is Fire Emblem. I mean, Nintendo has full directs now, and there's so much Fire Emblem that's going to be coming out that if you ever want to get into the series, you just don't know where to start. Honestly, in my opinion, where I would start with the Fire Emblem series is actually Fire Emblem on the Game Boy Advance. Now, Fire Emblem has been around for a very long time. The first entry was actually on the Super Famicom, and it wasn't until Super Smash Bros. Melee that Fire Emblem started getting really popular in the West, and they came out with Fire Emblem on the Game Boy Advance. Now, Fire Emblem on the Game Boy Advance is actually the 7th entry to the series, but it's the first Fire Emblem in the Western market, and Nintendo treats it that way. When you play this game, it shows you the ropes, and it kind of gives you the whole shebang of how to play Fire Emblem and how to get used to this strategy RPG, and I've been really enjoying it. There's a lot of difficulty with this game that I think is really rewarding, even more so that this game features permadeath in the sense that if a party member dies, they're gone. So each battle is more and more has this intense feeling to it because you get kind of drawn to the characters. Maybe you get attached to one of the characters and you really don't want to see them go forever. So I would really recommend Fire Emblem on the Game Boy Advance to start off your Fire Emblem fix. Now, the next game I'm going to be talking about, I know a lot of people are going to be like, I think everyone's played one of these, and of course that is Final Fantasy. Believe it or not, there are people out there who have never played a Final Fantasy, and now that Final Fantasy has 15 entries now and endless spin-offs, where to start? Well, I think that really depends on the gamer. If you're the kind of person that doesn't really care too much about graphics and you really like story, I would really recommend Final Fantasy 3 / Final Fantasy 6 on the Super Nintendo. And the reason why I would recommend this is because this game, in my opinion, shows you why Final Fantasy is so awesome. It's got a really fantastic story to it. It's got a very memorable soundtrack. The characters are just really well written. I really enjoyed this game, and you can play it now on the Super Nintendo, the PlayStation. You can get it on your smartphone. You can play it on Steam. It's really easily accessible as well, which makes it very easy for newcomers. Now, if you're more into like the modern graphics and you don't really care for pixel art, I know a lot of people are going to be saying Final Fantasy VII, and I do love Final Fantasy VII. I think Final Fantasy VII would be not only a great first Final Fantasy, but maybe even your first JRPG could be Final Fantasy VII. It wouldn't be a bad thing. But the thing about Final Fantasy VII is it hasn't really aged too well, so some people may be turned off by Cloud's Popeye arms. But if I was to talk about a modern Final Fantasy, I would actually recommend Final Fantasy X, because Final Fantasy X, in my opinion, was the last traditional single-player Final Fantasy. It has the turn-based combat we've came to know and love. It's got a great soundtrack. It's got great story, and the characters, Tidus, Lulu, Waka, I really enjoy the characters of Final Fantasy X, and now you can play it on PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4. You can play it on Steam. So, like Final Fantasy 6/3, it's easily accessible for newcomers. Now, one of my favorite JRPG series, of course, is the Dragon Quest series. And I've been talking a lot about Dragon Quest on my audio podcast, and I've mentioned it a couple times in my videos. I even made a Dragon Quest spin-off video, talking about my favorite spin-off games of that series. And I had some people message me, and they're like, where do I start? I've never played a Dragon Quest game. Where do I start with this? Honestly, most people would say, start with Dragon Warrior on the original NES. But to be honest, the first Dragon Warrior has so much grind sessions to it. It is a very wax-on, wax-off random battle JRPG that I wouldn't recommend it unless you're a huge fan of old-school JRPGs. I would actually recommend Dragon Quest VIII, and the reason why is because if you've played games like Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest VIII is a great way to kind of just get into something that's familiar, but at the same time get into a new series, if that makes any sense. It's very more so Final Fantasy-esque than the previous Dragon Quest entries, and now you can get Dragon Quest VIII on the PS2. Of course, you can get it on your phone, and now they just released it on the 3DS, so there's really no excuse to not try this game, and I highly recommend it. Now, Resident Evil 7 just came out. It's been getting rave reviews. A lot of people have been really enjoying it, and I was very surprised that some people who've been playing Resident Evil 7 have never went back and played some of the older Resident Evils, and they were kind of confused because they would play Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6 were essentially very action-packed, and they're like, this doesn't feel like Resident Evil. I recommend you guys play the Resident Evil HD collection. Now, the reason why I recommend this is because this shows you why Resident Evil is a survival horror series. It has everything. It has the horror, it has the survival, limited ammo, save points. It's an adrenaline rush, and the HD remaster does a great job making an old game feel new again. Now, this is an HD remaster of the GameCube remake that came out, I believe, in 2001, but it looks beautiful. It looks fantastic, and if you get a physical copy, you can actually get Resident Evil HD collection that has the original Resident Evil and Resident Evil 0, which is actually a prequel to the first Resident Evil. So you can play that and learn the backstory of STARS unit and learn about Wesker, learn about the T-Virus and Tyrant and Hunters, and I really recommend to try out the HD collection if you've never played it. So anyway guys, that is some games that I would really recommend the newcomers to a series. This is where I want you guys to come in though. I want you guys to leave a comment below and tell me a game that you would recommend to someone who's wanting to get into the series. It might even help me out, because I'll be honest, I think everyone can agree that not all of us have played every single game out there, and honestly I get kind of overwhelmed sometimes. I'll be wanting to play a game and I'm like, I don't even know where to start. You know, there's like the Persona series. I was like, where do I start with Persona? Do I start with Persona 1? Everyone's talking about Persona 4 being so well, but I don't want to play that if it's not connected. It gets really confusing sometimes, so definitely leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always guys, thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and as always, happy gaming.
Can't get enough of Excess Gaming Podcast? Be sure to check out our audio podcast on Podomatic.com. You can also subscribe to us on iTunes. And if you have a YouTube channel or podcast you'd like to share, be sure to check us out on Facebook on our group page and join the community. As always, guys, thank you so much for all the support, and happy gaming.